Alright, welcome back. Here's a look at what we'll be doing today. I'm going to add on to the multiple stances. I'm going to kind of show how you could go about changing the stance based on, equipping something rather than just using the middle mouse button to rotate through stances. Alright, so let's go ahead and get right into it. So, in our sandbox character, let's go ahead and get that opened up. And once we have that open, and we want to add a new variable. And this variable is going to be our inventory variable. And this is just going to be a basic setup in theory to kind of show you how you would go about doing this. Let's go ahead and name it inventory. And we're going to go ahead and make it a string. The string will be, the name of the equipment. And let's go ahead and change it from a single to a map. And it's going to be based off an integer, which will be, the amount. So you can check whether or not you have more than one, and if you do, you can equip it. Okay, so let's go ahead and add some entries to this map that we just created. I'll name one sword, and I'll give it an amount of 1. And I'll go ahead and add another entry, and I will name it mace, and I will give it an amount of 1. Okay. We can compile and save that. And now let's go ahead and create a widget. So let's go right click, go down to user interface and choose use widget blueprint and select user widget. And let's go ahead and name this something like inventory underscore W for widget. And let's go ahead and open this up. Double click and search for overlay. I'm going to use an overlay. You can use a canvas panel if you'd like. I don't like to mess with anchors. So go ahead and drag the overlay down. Now let's search for a border. And let's go ahead and drag the border over the overlay to make it a child. And let's go ahead and change the brush color of the overlay. I'm going to change it to something darker and a little bit more transparent. Select OK. And now I'm going to search for a vertical box. I'm going to drag that into the border. And I'm going to make the vertical box a variable. I'm going to change the name to equipment container underscore VB for vertical box. And now I'm going to search for a horizontal box. I'm going to drag that into the equipment container vertical box. And I'm going to search for text. And I'm going to drag that into the horizontal box. And I'm going to make that fill. I'm going to change the text to say equipment. And I'm going to give a little bit of padding to the vertical box to give it a little bit of a border. I'm going to select the border and change the padding a little bit. I'm going to give some padding to the top to bring it down a little bit. And I'm going to add some padding to the left to bring it to the right a little bit. And now I'm going to search for a button. I'm going to drag that into the vertical box, or horizontal box, I'm sorry. Drag that into the horizontal box, search for text, and then drag that into the button that you just put inside the horizontal box. And I'm going to change the text to be just an X. And I'm going to change the button tint to be red or something. All right. And I'll select OK. And then now I'm going to change the button to be a variable and name it something like close underscore BTN for button. Compile and save. Okay, now let's create another widget that will be called by this inventory widget. So go ahead and open up your content browser and let's right click and go down to user interface and select widget blueprint and select user widget, and we can name this equipment slot underscore W. Okay. We can go ahead and open up the equipment slot, and we'll just search for a button and drag that into the equipment slot. And then let's search for text. Actually, we'll change this button to a variable real quick, and we'll name it equipment underscore BTN. And now let's search for text and drag that into the equipment button and select the text and change that to a variable. And we can name this something like equipment name underscore text. All right, and now let's go back into our inventory widget event graph, and we want to right click and get player character, and this is inside the inventory widget, and we want to cast to our sandbox character and connect that to the event construct. And as CBP sandbox character, drag off of that and promote this to a variable so we can create a reference to our player character in this inventory widget. And let's drag that new reference out into the graph, and from that let's get our inventory that we created. And from the inventory, let's go ahead and find the value, and from the array of the values we want to do a for each loop, and the array element is the amount that we have of the weapon. So if we're going to check if it's greater than 0, and if it's true, then we have that weapon, and if we have that weapon, then we can equip it. All right. Well, actually, if we have that weapon, then it will be in our inventory, so we can add it to our inventory. So let's get a reference to our sandbox character and search for inventory and get a reference to our inventory again. And from that inventory, let's grab our keys and plug the keys into the true value of the branch. And from the keys array, we want to get a copy. And we want to plug the index of our for each loop into our keys copy. Because they're a map, the key shares an index with the value. So the sword is index 1 and its value is also index 1, whether it's 1, 0, or wherever the value is 1 or 100, the index is still the same as the key. So from the keys we want to create the widget, and the class is going to be the equipment slot widget that we just created. So go ahead and search for equipment slot and choose that. And from the return value, we want to get the name of the equipment. So get equipment name, that variable we created. And from that, we want to get text, or set text actually, set text. And connect those two nodes. And then we want to plug the return value from the get copy of the keys into the text. And that will convert it from a string to text. And that will change the name of the equipment slot to whatever the name of the equipment is. All right, and now we want to grab our equipment container vertical box and drag that into the graph, and we want to add child to vertical box. And we want to grab the return value of our equipment slot widget and put that into the content of our add child to vertical box. And we want to connect that add child to vertical box to the set text node. So this will add a button for every piece of equipment that we have that is greater than 0, because if it's greater than 0, we have it in our inventory, so then we can equip it. So this will add a button that will allow us to select it, which was the equipment slot. So now at the complete of our for each loop, we want to get a player controller, and we want to set show mouse cursor to true. And then we also want to set the game paused while we equip our new item. So we want to set that value to true. And so now we want to get the close button variable. We want to select that and select on clicked. And we can copy and paste the get player controller and set player pause, and we can just set those values to false now. And then off of the set player or set game paused, we can search for remove from parent, and that will remove this widget from the viewport. Okay, so now let's make a structure. So in the data folder, in the blueprints folder, let's right click and search for struct, and then blueprint structure. Let's create that, and let's name it s_weapon, and go ahead and open that up. And in this structure, we will get the name of our equipment, which will be a string. So we will make this a string, and this will be the name of our weapon. Add another variable. We will name this weapon index. We'll change this to be an index, or integer, sorry. And add another variable, and we will name this fighting stance, and we'll change this to be our enumerator fighting stance. So go ahead and search for E fighting stance, or whatever you named your enumerator that has your stances. And go ahead and save that. And now we need to create a data table for this structure. So you can create a folder for your data tables or put it somewhere else. But once you're ready, right click and search for data table and select data table. It's under miscellaneous, and we want to choose the s_weapon structure that we just created for this data table. Every data table needs a structure that it's associated with, and we'll go ahead and name this to weapons_dt. Let's go ahead and open this up, and let's go ahead and add a couple entries for this data table, a couple weapons. We'll name one sword, and we'll give it the name sword. Its weapon index will be 0, so when we use the equip weapon function that we created, it will know which weapon it is, and our fighting stance will be sword. Now let's go ahead and add another one. We will go ahead and name this mace. The name can be mace too. You could call it rusty mace or something, and the weapon index will be 1. That way when we call equip weapon, it will know what we're trying to equip. We'll set the fighting stance to two-handed weapon for the mace. Alright, that's good for now. Let's go ahead and save everything. And now inside of our equipment slot widget, let's go inside the graph for that widget, and on the event construct, let's get player character. From the return value, let's go ahead and cast to sandbox character and connect that to the event construct. And from the as CBP sandbox character, we want to promote that to a variable to create a reference to our sandbox character inside of this equipment slot widget. Go ahead and save that. And now on the equip button, we want to select that and choose on clicked. And now let's go ahead and grab out our equipment name text and grab that and get the text. And we're going to convert that to a string. And now we want to right click and get data table row, a utility. And we want to drag that converted string into the row name. And for the data table, we want to select the weapons data table that we just created. And from the out row, we want to break sWeapon. And we want to drag a reference to our sandbox character out, and we want to use the equip weapon function. And if the row is found, if the name is found, if we have a sword, then we will plug the weapon index into that weapon index, and we will plug the fighting stance into the new fighting stance. And that will equip the weapon. Okay, so let's create an input for our equipment screen. So let's duplicate our change stance input action, and let's go ahead and rename this something like equip weapon. And in our GDC, let's open that up, IMC_GDC. Let's go ahead and add a mapping, and we'll select the equipment menu mapping that we just created, and select the keyboard and press tab to map the binding to the tab key. And let's add a gamepad input. I will choose the top one. I think that's already being used, but this is just to show you, like, how do you go about adding a window. Okay, so back in our sandbox character, let's call this input that we just created. So let's search for IA equipment menu and select that. And from the started, we want to create widget, and we want to add the widget, the inventory widget that we created. So let's search for inventory _W and select that. And from the return value, we will select add to viewport, and that will add it to our viewport so we can select our equipment. And it will give its fighting stance. So now we can change our anim montages based on our fighting stance. So get fighting stance, switch on enumerator fighting stance, and where you're calling your anim montage based on the stance, you can call your montage. So if it's a boxing montage, you'll call boxing. If it's a sword one, you'll call your sword montage. And if it's a two-handed weapon, you'll call your two-handed weapon montage. So this is getting clunky, so let's select all these, right click, and collapse to a function. And we can call it something simple like play combo strike 1. All right, and that will play all the first entries in your combo. All right, you can open that up. I'm just going to go ahead and change the montages just for the first one to give you an idea of what to do. I'm going to search for my one-handed melee strike for my sword montage, and then for my two-handed weapon montage, I will choose a great sword slash that I got from Mixamo for a two-handed weapon. All right, and once I have that, I'm going to copy and paste this function for as many combo strikes as I have in my combo. In my case, it's 4. You know, you could have different combo lengths based on your weapon, you know, and if for whatever reason your stance doesn't have that many combos, it just wouldn't call anything, you know, in that. So let's go ahead and delete these montages and pull in these functions that we just created for these combos. And connect them to the corresponding attack index. And compile and save. And let's go ahead and check it out. All right, so there you go. And here are the montages based on the weapon that I'm using. So, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for coming back, and I will see you next time. Take care.